The night was calm and silent. Only the soft wind moved through the tall pine trees outside Ethan Cole's cabin. The old man sat in his small living room, reading a dusty book under the weak glow of a single lamp. He liked quiet nights like this, no city noise, no people, just the sound of nature and peace. Ethan was a retired engineer who once worked for the Earth Defense Corps. He had helped design Starship, engines and planetary defense grids during the early days of human space exploration. But those days were long gone. Now he lived far from everything, in a small wooden cabin near the edge of a forest in northern Canada. It was a life of quiet, of memories and of loneliness. But that night, something strange happened. A sudden heavy knock echoed through the cabin. Thud, thud, thud. Ethan froze. He looked at the clock. It was 11:57 p.m. Who could be visiting this deep in the forest in the middle of the night? He didn't have neighbors for miles. Another knock followed, louder this time. He stood up slowly and reached for his flashlight. His hand brushed against the old plasma pistol he kept near the door, an old habit from his Defense Corps days. He didn't like to use it, but tonight his instincts whispered that he might need it. Taking a deep breath, he unlatched the door and pulled it open. At first, he saw nothing but the darkness outside. Then his eyes caught movement. A tall figure stood on the porch. The light from inside the cabin spilled over her, revealing a sight that made Ethan's breath catch. She was not human. Her skin was a deep, soft silver with faint markings that shimmered when the light touched them. Her eyes glowed pale blue, bright enough to be seen even in the dark. She wore battle armor, scuffed, dented, and marked with burns, as if she had survived a fight. Her hair, white as snow, hung in uneven strands around her face, and behind her, half hiding under her long cloak, was a small child. The little one clutched her hand tightly, eyes wide and frightened. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the wind whispered between the trees. Then the woman lifted her hand slightly, palm open in peace. Her voice was deep but soft when she spoke. Human, need safe. The words were broken, heavy with an accent, but Ethan understood them. He blinked, unsure what to do. Safe, you mean? You need help? The woman nodded once, then glanced behind her, as if afraid something might come from the darkness. Hunters. Close, she said, the word almost a growl. Ethan hesitated. His logical mind screamed that this was impossible. Aliens did not just show up at your doorstep. The last recorded alien contact was decades ago, and it had ended badly. But something in the woman's eyes, fear mixed with fierce protectiveness, stopped him from shutting the door. He could see the child trembling, clutching a small metallic cube to her chest. She couldn't have been older than 6 in human years. Ethan lowered the flashlight, sighed softly, and stepped aside. Come in. The woman looked surprised for a moment, then nodded and guided the child inside. When she crossed the doorway, Ethan felt a strange, static-like hum in the air, like energy shifting around her. He closed the door behind them and locked it, though he wasn't sure what good that would do against whoever was chasing her. The woman stood in the middle of the room, scanning every corner like a trained soldier. Her hand rested on a weapon strapped to her leg, but she didn't draw it. The child stayed close to her side, peeking at Ethan with wide silver blue eyes. He noticed the faint smell of burnt metal and smoke. Her armor had holes. A few glowing circuits flickered along the surface. She looked like she had crashed hard. Ethan pointed toward the couch. You can sit there. You both look tired. The woman frowned slightly, not understanding all his words, but the child tugged her hand and whispered something in their own language. Slowly, the woman sat down, her movements still tense and alert. Ethan went to the kitchen, poured warm water into 2 cups, and returned. It's not much, he said gently, setting one in front of the woman and another for the child. But it's warm. The woman lifted the cup, sniffed it carefully, then drank a small sip. Her expression softened slightly. Thanks. Human. My name's Ethan, he said. Ethan Cole. She tilted her head, repeating, Ethan. Then she touched her chest and said, Karel. She pointed to the child. Tira, Ethan smiled. Karel and Tira. All right, you're safe here for now. But Karel's sharp eyes turned toward the window. Not safe. Hunters track. They find soon, Ethan frowned. Who are these hunters? Karel hesitated, then replied, "They want—" "Silence, we escape. They kill." Her words were few, but the meaning was clear. Someone wanted them dead. Ethan's old soldier instincts woke up again. He hadn't fought in years, but the habits never left. He turned on a few old security systems around his cabin. Hidden motion sensors, defensive drones, and energy shields he had built for fun after retirement. He never thought he'd actually need them. Karel watched him work, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You, soldier?" "Engineer," Ethan said. "But I built weapons, defenses, things like that." She nodded slowly, a faint spark of respect in her gaze. "Human strong. Build with hands, not fear," Ethan chuckled. "Sometimes fear helps. Keeps you alive." For a few minutes, silence returned. The child, Tira, had fallen asleep on the couch, her small hand still holding that metal cube. Karel looked at her daughter with a softness that surprised Ethan. For all her armor and strength, she looked like any mother trying to protect her child. Ethan noticed her arm trembling slightly. He pointed to the faint glow on her side where the armor was cracked. "You're hurt," Karel shook her head. "No matter. It does matter," he said firmly. "Sit still." He fetched an old med kit from the wall cabinet. Carol's eyes followed him cautiously, but she didn't resist. When Ethan lifted the broken part of her armor, he saw a shallow burn. Nothing fatal, but painful. He applied a cooling gel and wrapped it gently. "Better?" he asked. She looked at him with quiet surprise. "You help enemy?" "Enemy?" Ethan frowned. "I don't see an enemy here. Just someone who needed help." Karel studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, almost respectfully. "Human, strange, but kind." The night deepened. The wind outside grew stronger, whistling through the forest. Ethan checked his sensors. Something flickered at the edge of the forest perimeter. He turned back to Karel. "You said they might find you soon?" Karel stood immediately, her warrior instinct returning. "Yes, hunters use energy trace. My ship crashed near forest. They come." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we'd better make sure they don't find you easily." He opened a hidden panel in the floor, revealing a small workstation filled with old gadgets. Mini drones, camouflage nets, and shield emitters. Carol's eyes widened slightly. "You have armory," she said. "Not much," Ethan replied, smiling faintly. "But it'll do." Together, they started setting up a simple defense grid around the cabin. Karel moved with silent precision, her movements trained and efficient. Ethan admired her skill. She was clearly a soldier, but also a mother fighting for her child's life. When they finished, Karel looked at him. "You help, why?" Ethan looked out the window, then at the sleeping child. "Because if I were in your place, I'd hope someone would do the same." For a moment, the warrior said nothing. Then she gave a small, almost respectful bow. "Then Karel owes life to Ethan," he shook his head. "Just get some rest. We'll deal with whatever comes tomorrow." Outside, far in the forest, a faint red light blinked among the trees, unseen by either of them. The hunters were already closing in, but inside the small cabin, for the first time in years, Ethan Cole didn't feel alone. Something had changed tonight. The universe had just come knocking, literally, and he had opened the door. And soon that decision would echo far beyond the quiet woods of Earth. Morning sunlight crept through the curtains of Ethan Cole's cabin. The night had been long and tense. Ethan barely slept, sitting near the window with his old plasma pistol in hand, watching the tree line. But the forest remained quiet, hiding its secrets. Karel and her daughter Tira were still asleep on the couch. The child's small hand was clutching that metallic cube again. Something precious, Ethan could tell. Karel, even in sleep, looked alert. One arm was around her daughter, the other near her weapon. Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee and took a long breath. He couldn't believe what had happened the night before. A real alien warrior and her child were sleeping in his cabin. He had seen many things during his time with the Earth Defense Corps, but this was different. This wasn't a battle or a mission, this was personal. He glanced at the woman again. The armor she wore was strange, made from materials he didn't recognize. Its edges were sharp and elegant, but the damage on it showed signs of energy burns and plasma impacts. She had definitely been in a fight. As he studied her armor, Karel's eyes snapped open. "Human," she said softly, her tone alert. Ethan raised his hand slightly. "Easy, just checking your gear. You slept for a few hours." Karel sat up slowly, scanning the room. When she saw her daughter still sleeping, she relaxed a little. Tira safe? Ethan nodded. She's fine. You both are, Carell looked out the window. Hunter's not stopped. They come again, Ethan frowned. We can't stay here long then. She tilted her head. You help more? He hesitated. I already started. Might as well finish. Carol's eyes softened slightly, a rare expression for a warrior. Thank you, Ethan. After breakfast, Ethan led her outside to the forest. He showed her the defensive grid he had set up during the night, small motion sensors hidden among the trees, connected to his cabin system. I built these years ago, he explained. Never thought I'd actually use them. Carell examined one of the sensors closely. Simple but clever, she said. Human design, small, fast, not loud, Ethan chuckled. That's kind of how we survive. Small, fast, and noisy when we have to be. They spent the next few hours improving the defenses. Carell used parts salvaged from her damaged armor and shipped to enhance Ethan's devices. She connected them to a strange wrist module she carried, and the sensors glowed faintly blue. Ethan watched her work in amazement. You're a warrior and an engineer? Carell shook her head. All Virith warriors learn both. War teaches us to build what we need. Her words impressed Ethan. She wasn't just strong, she was smart and capable. And yet, he could see exhaustion in her movements, the weight of someone who had been running for too long. When they finished setting up, Carell crouched near a rock and placed her palm on the ground. A soft hum filled the air. Ethan saw faint symbols glow under her hand. What are you doing? He asked. Signal cloak, she explained. Hides energy trace. Hunters track with machines. This confused them. Ethan smiled. You really came prepared. Carell looked at him seriously. Always prepared. Or die. Her blunt honesty made Ethan pause. This wasn't a woman who said things lightly. Whatever she and her child had escaped from, it wasn't a small threat. Later that afternoon, the three of them shared a meal. It was simple, bread, fruit, and water, but Tira smiled shyly as she ate. The little girl's eyes were bright and curious. Every time she looked at Ethan, she giggled quietly, whispering something to her mother in their language. Ethan smiled. She's cute. What's she saying? Carell gave a small smile. She says you talk funny. Like her learning words, he laughed. Well, she's not wrong. Tira leaned closer to the cube she carried and pressed one side. It projected a small image, a hologram of stars and planets. Ethan leaned forward, fascinated. What's that? He asked. Carell hesitated, then said, Map shows home. Shows danger. The projection zoomed in on a cluster of stars. One of them pulsed red. Carell pointed at it. Our world, Virith, hunters come from there now. They chase us because I know truth. Truth? Ethan asked. Carell's face darkened. They lie to people. Say humans weak, lost, but not true, Ethan frowned. Wait, you know about humans? Carell nodded slowly. Long ago, Virith ships come to Earth. Before your first stars travel. We see humans, small but brave. My ancestors called Earth the world of fires that walk. They say one day humans light galaxy again. Ethan stared at her. That's impossible. There's no record of that. Carell looked straight at him. Because your leaders forget, and ours made them forget. Ethan sat back, trying to take it all in. If what she said was true, humanity's connection to the stars went far deeper than anyone realized. As the evening approached, Ethan checked the sensors again. Everything seemed calm, but Carell didn't relax. She stood near the window, scanning the forest with sharp eyes. You're not resting, Ethan said. You should. You've been running too long. Carell shook her head. Warriors rest after victory, not before, Ethan sighed. Then at least let me handle something. I can check the wreckage of your ship, maybe get parts we can use. Her eyes narrowed. Dangerous. I've done worse, he said with a grin. After a pause, Carell nodded. Take this. She handed him a small device. Press if trouble. I come. Ethan nodded, clipped it to his belt, and headed toward the forest. The air outside was crisp, filled with the smell of pine and earth. Ethan followed a faint trail of smoke until he saw it, a crashed ship half buried in the dirt. The hull was sleek but torn apart, glowing with dying energy cells. Strange symbols were engraved along the sides. He climbed closer carefully. Most of the ship was destroyed, but a few systems still flickered. He recognized a communication console, half functional but recoverable. If Carell could fix it, maybe they could send a distress. signal, or even locate her people. He packed what he could into a bag and turned to leave, when a sudden rustling came from behind the wreck. Ethan froze. A shadow moved between the trees. A tall, thin figure with metallic armor and a mask shaped like an insect's face stepped out. Its eyes glowed red. "Hunter," Ethan whispered. The creature raised a scanning device and Ethan ducked behind a log. He pressed the signal device Karel had given him. A faint blue light blinked. The hunter turned toward the light, clicking and hissing in a strange rhythm. It began to move closer. Ethan's heart raced. He grabbed his plasma pistol and aimed carefully. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but muscle memory took over. When the creature stepped into clear view, he fired. The plasma bolt struck its shoulder, sending sparks flying. The hunter let out a sharp screech and returned fire, burning a hole through a nearby tree. Ethan rolled behind the wreck, firing again. Then a blur of silver light shot through the forest. Karel appeared, her armor glowing faintly, her movements fast and precise. She landed in front of Ethan and slashed with a bright blade of energy, cutting through the hunter's weapon. The alien attacker staggered, and Karel struck again, a clean, swift motion that sent it crashing to the ground. Sparks hissed. The forest went silent. Ethan exhaled shakily. "You got here fast." Karel gave a small nod. "I said I'd come." She crouched beside the fallen hunter, examining its mask. "Scout only," she said. "Others come soon." Ethan looked toward the dark sky. "Then we don't have much time." They gathered what they could from the wreckage and hurried back to the cabin. Karel worked through the night, using the salvaged parts to strengthen their defenses. Ethan helped where he could, his hands steady but his thoughts racing. When dawn broke, the cabin looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Karel finally allowed herself to rest for a moment. She stood by the window watching the sunrise. Tira ran up and hugged her leg. Ethan smiled softly at the sight. "She's strong, just like her mother." Karel looked at him. "She must be. Galaxy is cruel, but maybe humans make it gentle again." Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked out at the horizon where the forest stretched endlessly. They were no longer just hiding. They were preparing, and deep inside he knew the real fight hadn't even begun. The forest was quiet again, but the silence felt different this time. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. Ethan Cole stood near the cabin window, scanning the tree line with his old binoculars. The early morning fog rolled between the trunks, making it hard to see far. The air smelled of damp soil and electricity from the energy shields Karel had set up. Karel was outside, walking the perimeter with her weapon drawn. She moved with the calm focus of a trained warrior, checking each sensor and trap they had prepared. Her silver armor gleamed faintly under the weak sunlight. Inside, little Tira was sitting near the table, quietly drawing with one of Ethan's pencils on old paper. She hummed a soft tune, something alien and beautiful. Ethan smiled when he heard it. It was strange how quickly the child had become a part of his quiet home. He turned his attention back to the forest. Something deep in his gut told him trouble was near. Karel returned after a while. "Perimeter strong," she said, stepping inside. "But I feel them close," Ethan frowned. "You can feel them?" Karel nodded. "Hunters send waves. Energy smell. My armor reads it." Ethan walked over to his control panel and checked the motion sensors. A few of them were flickering faintly. "You're right," he said quietly. "Something's moving out there." Karel's eyes hardened. "They come." By nightfall, the tension had grown thick. The cabin was dark, lights off to avoid detection. Only the soft blue glow from Karel's wrist device lit the room. Ethan stood beside her, both of them watching the small holographic map she projected. "3 signatures," Karel whispered. "Scouts testing ground before full hunt." Ethan clenched his jaw. "So this is just the beginning." Karel nodded. "Always start small. See how prey runs." "Well," Ethan said, loading his plasma pistol, "we're not running." Karel gave him a quick look, half surprise, half respect. "You fight? Someone has to keep your sensors running," he said with a small smile. "And besides, I'm not letting them get anywhere near your daughter." Karel looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly, "You have warrior heart, Ethan Cole." Outside, the forest moved. Shadows shifted between trees. The first red beam of a hunter scanner swept through the mist. Ethan and Karel crouched behind the wall, weapons ready. The sensors outside began to blink. Movement detected. Then the first explosion hit. A loud boom shook the cabin as one of the outer traps detonated. A flash of light lit up the trees. Karel jumped to her feet, moving fast.
They test shield,
she shouted. Ethan rushed to the control panel. Shield's holding, barely. Karel darted to the door, fired her weapon, and a bright blue beam tore through the night, striking a moving figure in the distance. The sound that followed was an unnatural screech, like metal grinding against bone. More red lights appeared among the trees. 3, maybe 4. The hunters were advancing. Ethan took a deep breath and activated the old defense drones he had hidden near the forest floor. The machines rose silently, their cameras glowing faint green. "Come on, boys," he muttered. "Let's give them a welcome." The drones fired small plasma bursts, quick and precise. 2 hunters ducked, returning fire. Energy bolts hit the trees, burning through bark and sending sparks flying. Karel moved like a shadow, fast and graceful, dodging shots and firing back. She fought with skill that took Ethan's breath away. Every movement was calculated, efficient. She was protecting not only herself but also the cabin behind her. Ethan stayed by the door, aiming carefully. His plasma pistol hummed as he fired short bursts, covering Karel's flank. He wasn't as fast or strong, but his aim was steady. The battle felt endless. Light flashing, smoke rising, the forest echoing with alien sounds. Then suddenly the firing stopped. The night went silent again. Ethan listened carefully. "Did we get them?" Karel shook her head. "No, they wait. Hunters never give up," she was right. A faint humming sound filled the air. A low, pulsing tone that vibrated through the ground. Karel's eyes widened. "They call ship." Before Ethan could react, a blinding beam of red light descended from above the trees. A small craft, sleek and black, appeared overhead. It hovered silently, scanning the area. "Down!" Karel shouted. She grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him away from the window just as a laser shot tore through the wall, scorching the wood. Tira screamed from the other room. Ethan's heart jumped. "Tira!" Karel sprinted to her daughter, shielding her with her body. "Stay close, little one," she whispered. Ethan crawled to the control console, fingers flying over the buttons. "We can't take that ship head on. I'll overload the shield grid, turn it into a pulse blast." Karel looked at him sharply. "Dangerous. Better than being burned alive," he said, voice calm but firm. She nodded once. "Do it." Ethan rerouted the power. The lights flickered. The energy shield outside began to hum louder, brighter, until it glowed blue-white. "Ready?" Ethan shouted. Karel covered Tira with her arms. "Do it now!" Ethan hit the switch. A massive wave of light burst from the cabin, spreading through the forest. The energy pulse hit the hovering hunter ship head-on. Sparks exploded across its hull. The ship jerked violently, losing control. It spun once and crashed deep into the trees with a deafening roar. The ground shook. Smoke and dust filled the air. Ethan panted, leaning against the wall. That actually worked. Karel stood slowly, eyes scanning the damage. "You fight like Virith Captain." He smiled weakly. "I just build things. You do the fighting." She looked at him seriously. "No, you build courage. That's stronger than Blade." When the noise faded, Ethan checked outside. The forest was glowing faintly from the wreckage. "That ship's down, but there might be more coming," he said. Karel nodded. "We leave soon." "Must hide deep?" Tira tugged her mother's hand, looking scared. "Mama, more bad ones come?" she asked in her small voice. Karel knelt down, touching her daughter's cheek gently. "Not now. Human, protect us. We strong." Ethan's heart softened at the sight. For all her warrior nature, Karel was still a mother first. He sighed. "We can move to the old mining tunnels north of here. No signals get in or out from there. We can rest and plan." Karel thought for a moment, then nodded. "Good, you lead." "I guard." They packed quickly. Food, tools, weapons, and the small cube Tira carried. The cube pulsed faintly now, as if reacting to something. Karel looked at it with concern but said nothing. Before they left, Ethan took one last look around his cabin. The walls were scorched, half the window was gone, and smoke still rose from the roof. It had been his home for 10 quiet years, but now it was just a memory. He whispered, "Guess peace was never meant to last." Karel looked at him. "Peace come after fight, not before." They moved out through the forest quietly, guided by Karel's scanner. The path to the tunnels was long and rough. The night was cold and mist clung to the ground. Every now and then a distant explosion echoed, proof that the hunters were searching again. Ethan carried Tira for part of the way when she grew tired. The child rested her head on his shoulder, half asleep. Carell walked beside them, her expression unreadable, but there was a faint hint of gratitude in her eyes. After hours of walking, they finally reached a rocky hill covered with moss and vines. Behind it was a hidden entrance to the old mining tunnels. Ethan used his scanner to open the sealed gate. "Here we are," he said quietly. "No one will find us here easily." Carell stepped inside first, scanning the dark passage. "Good place," she said. "Safe for now." They lit a few lamps and settled inside the main chamber. The air smelled of dust and stone. Ethan set up a small power generator while Carell checked her weapons. Tira curled up near a rock, clutching her cube, her eyes heavy with sleep. Ethan looked at Carell. "You think they'll stop?" Carell shook her head. "Hunters never stop, but they fear what they don't understand." She looked at him, her gaze strong. "They fear you now." Ethan blinked. "Me, why?" "Because human not follow rules of war," Carell said softly. "You fight with heart. That they can't predict." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess that's something we're good at." Carell nodded. "Yes. Maybe Galaxy need heart again." As the night settled deep into the tunnels, Ethan sat beside the small fire they had made. Carell rested nearby, finally letting her guard down. The silence was no longer heavy. It was calm. But both of them knew this peace wouldn't last forever. The hunters had seen what humans could do, and soon they would come again. This time with everything they had. The next morning arrived slowly with the forest covered in mist. Ethan sat beside the fire, staring at the small flame that flickered weakly in the cold air. His hands trembled slightly as he poured water into a pot. Carell was still resting in the back room, her arm wrapped in a soft cloth, and Tira was quietly drawing on a piece of paper Ethan had given her. He looked at the two of them and felt something change inside. Just a few days ago, he was a lonely man living in silence. Now his small cabin had become a secret refuge, hiding an alien warrior and her child. And somehow it felt right. Carell woke up slowly, her movements still stiff. She stepped out from the back room, her eyes scanning the window and corners out of habit. "You did not sleep," she said softly. Ethan gave a tired smile. "Couldn't. I kept thinking about those creatures last night." "The hunters, right?" Carell nodded. "Yes, they follow orders, no mercy. But they are not the biggest danger now." That made Ethan look up sharply. "Not the biggest danger? What could be worse than them?" She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "My own people." The words hit Ethan like a hammer. "Your people? Why would they come after you?" Carell walked to the table and looked at the small device Ethan had placed there, a cracked metallic cube from her ship. "Because I found something," she said. "Something they do not want others to know." Ethan leaned forward. "What kind of something?" Carell pressed her hand over the cube. It glowed faintly, projecting an image into the air. A series of holographic pictures showing what looked like old ruins, carved stones, strange symbols, and old human faces. Ethan blinked in confusion. "Wait, those look like—" "Yes," Carell interrupted softly. "They are from your planet." "From Earth?" Ethan's mind raced. "You mean your people came here before?" Carell nodded slowly. "Long ago. Before your cities, before your machines. My ancestors visited this world. They found early humans, your people, struggling to survive. But there was something about them. Something different." Ethan leaned closer. "Different how?" She looked at him seriously. "Humans had strength of will. Even when facing death, they did not give up. My ancestors were amazed. They recorded stories about it. They said humans carried a spark that could change the galaxy. But when war came among our worlds, those records were hidden. Your world was forgotten. Until now." Ethan stared at the glowing image. The symbols seemed to dance, forming shapes that looked strangely familiar, like old cave paintings he had once seen in books. "So your people once saw something special in us?" he said slowly. Carell nodded. "Yes, and I think that same strength is still here." She looked at him meaningfully. "I saw it when you stood against the hunters. You are not trained for war, yet you fought. You used your mind, not just weapons. That is the human way." Ethan felt his face warm with quiet pride. "I guess we don't like bullies," he said, trying to smile. Carell almost smiled back, but there was still sadness in her eyes. But if my people learn what I found, they will destroy the evidence. They fear the truth. They fear that humans may rise again. Ethan frowned. Then we can't let that happen. There has to be a way to show this to others, to send it out. Carell's expression hardened. There is one way. The orbital relay. She pointed to the sky. It is an old communication station, left by my people during early exploration. If we can reach it, I can send the data across the galaxy. Ethan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Where is it? Carell hesitated. 200 kilometers north, hidden in the mountains. But the hunters will search for it too. They know I might go there. Ethan stood up, determination lighting his face. Then we'll have to move fast. I can modify the rover in my workshop. It's old, but it can handle rough terrain. Carell looked at him, surprised. You would help me do this? It is dangerous, Ethan gave a small laugh. You think I came this far just to stop now? Besides, I owe you one. You saved my life. She looked at him quietly, her eyes softening. You humans. Always surprising, that night they prepared. Ethan worked on the rover, adding armor plates made from Carell's damaged ship panels. Carell recharged her weapon using power cells he scavenged from old drones. Even Tira helped by packing food and water into small containers. For the first time, they felt like a team. As the moon rose, Ethan sat outside, tightening the last bolt on the rover. He looked up at the stars and whispered, If humans were special once, maybe we still can be. The next morning, the journey began. The rover rumbled through the forest roads, heading north. The air grew colder as they climbed higher into the mountains. Snow started to fall. Carell sat beside him, scanning the horizon with her sharp alien eyes, while Tira slept peacefully in the back seat. After hours of silence, Ethan asked quietly, Carell, what will happen if your people learn the truth? She was silent for a long time. Then she said softly, It will change everything. My people believe they are the strongest. But if they remember humans, if they remember the spark, they may begin to see differently. It could unite us. Ethan nodded slowly. And maybe stop more wars. Yes, Carell agreed. Maybe peace. Suddenly, a red light flashed on the rover's dashboard. Ethan's heart jumped. They've found us. Carell turned sharply. Behind them, through the falling snow, glowing ships appeared in the distance, small, fast, and deadly. Hunters, she said coldly. Ethan pressed the accelerator. The rover sped up, bouncing over rocks and snow. Energy blasts hit the ground behind them, sending dirt flying. Carell fired back through the window, her plasma rifle glowing blue. One of the hunter ships exploded, but two more followed closely. Tira woke up crying, and Ethan shouted, Hold on! He turned the rover sharply, heading toward a narrow canyon. The hunters tried to follow, but the canyon walls were too tight. One ship crashed against the rock, the explosion lighting up the snow. Ethan drove through the smoke, his face covered in sweat. Finally, after a long chase, silence returned. The mountains grew quiet again. Carell lowered her weapon slowly. You drive like a warrior, she said, breathing hard. Ethan laughed weakly. Guess I learned fast. They stopped to rest in a cave that night. The air inside was cold but safe. Tira slept between them, wrapped in a blanket. Ethan looked at Carell, her face lit by the small fire they built. When we reach that relay, he said, what happens next? Carell looked into the flames. If we succeed, my people will know the truth. They will learn that humans are not weak or forgotten. You are the reason we still exist. And maybe, just maybe, they will see that strength does not come from power, it comes from heart. Ethan smiled faintly. Then let's make sure that message gets through. Carell looked at him quietly, her expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, she said softly, Ethan, thank you. He shrugged, pretending not to blush, just doing what anyone would do. But deep inside, both of them knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have opened their door that night. Not everyone would risk their life for strangers from the stars. Outside, the wind howled, carrying snow across the dark mountains. Somewhere beyond the peaks, the orbital relay waited, ancient, silent, and ready to awaken after centuries. And as the small fire flickered in the cave, Ethan realized that their journey was no longer just about survival. It was about truth, about reminding the galaxy what it meant to be human. The journey through the mountains grew harder with every passing hour. The wind screamed across the frozen cliffs and snow fell thick, turning the world into white silence. Ethan's hands were stiff on the rover's controls, but he didn't stop. Karel sat beside him watching the horizon, her face set in cold determination. Tira slept in the backseat, her head resting on a small blanket. Every few minutes, Karel turned to make sure her daughter was safe, her protective instincts never resting. Finally, after hours of travel, the rover stopped at the edge of a high ridge. Below them lay a wide valley filled with strange metal shapes, ruins half buried in ice. In the center stood a tall tower with faint blue lights running up its sides. It looked ancient and powerful. Karel's eyes widened slightly. "The orbital relay," she whispered. "It still lives." Ethan looked at the tower with awe. "That thing's been here for centuries?" She nodded. "My ancestors built it before your world was ready to reach the stars. It can send messages across light years." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then that's our finish line." They left the rover hidden behind rocks and started climbing down the icy slope. The wind cut through their clothes, but neither slowed. Karel carried her plasma rifle, and Ethan carried a small power unit he had repaired from her ship's wreckage, enough to restart the relay, if they could reach its heart. As they moved through the valley, the silence broke. A deep humming sound came from above. Ethan looked up and his heart sank. Dark shapes moved through the clouds. 3 hunter ships. "They found us," Ethan said quietly. Karel's grip on her weapon tightened. "Then we finish this fast." They ran toward the tower as the ships descended, their engines roaring through the thin air. Energy blasts struck the ground, sending snow and debris flying. Ethan grabbed Tira's hand and pulled her close while Karel fired back, her blue bolts cutting through the storm. The tower's ancient doors were half open. Ethan pushed them apart with all his strength, and they slipped inside. The interior glowed faintly, filled with strange alien technology. Dust floated in the air, but the relay's power core still pulsed weakly. Ethan placed the power unit into a damaged slot. "This should give it a jump," he said, panting. Sparks flew, then the lights brightened. The hum of energy filled the chamber. Karel moved to the central console and placed her cube into it. "Once this data is transmitted," she said, "everyone in the Vireth Empire will know the truth. They will see what humans are." Ethan nodded. "Then let's send it." Before she could activate it, the tower shook. A blast tore through one wall. One of the hunters had landed. Heavy metal footsteps echoed down the corridor. Karel looked at Ethan. "You must hold them off while I finish this." He swallowed hard. "I'm not sure I can." "You can," she said firmly. "You already did." Ethan took a deep breath, grabbed a metal rod from the floor, and ran to the entrance. He crouched behind a broken wall as the first hunter entered, a tall creature in dark armor, eyes glowing red. "Target located," it hissed in a robotic voice. Ethan waited, heart pounding. Then he threw a small energy cell from Karel's pack. It hit the ground and exploded with a flash. The hunter stumbled, and Ethan charged forward, swinging the rod with all his strength. Sparks flew as he struck the creature's arm, knocking its weapon away. "Not on my planet," he growled. Karel kept working at the console, her fingers flying over the controls. Transmission sequence almost ready. Another blast shook the floor. 2 more hunters broke through the side wall. Karel turned, firing shot after shot, blue light filling the room. 1 hunter fell, but the other kept coming, fast and strong. Ethan ran to help, slamming the metal rod into the creature's leg. Karel took the chance to fire one final blast straight into its chest. The hunter collapsed, smoke rising from its armor. For a moment, the tower was silent again except for the sound of the storm outside. Karel turned back to the console. "It is done," she said. "Transmission sent." Ethan let out a shaky laugh. "So, that's it? The truth's out there now?" Karel nodded. "Yes, across the stars," but then a loud alarm blared. The screen in front of her flashed red. She read the symbols quickly and her face fell. "No, the hunters planted a core destabilizer. The reactor is overloading." Ethan's stomach dropped. "How long?" "Minutes. Maybe less." Ethan looked around. "Can we shut it down?" Karel shook her head. "No time. We must leave." But Ethan's eyes went to the relay's main console. If that explodes, the transmission might not fully send. "We'll lose it." Karel looked at him, understanding his thoughts. "Ethan, no." He gave a small smile. "Hey, you said humans are stubborn." Karel grabbed his arm. "You will die." He looked at her gently. If this message can stop a war, if it can make your people see us differently, then maybe it's worth it. She stared at him, her eyes filled with something more than respect, something almost like sorrow. You carry the spark my ancestors saw. You remind us what we lost. Ethan touched her shoulder. Then keep it alive. Take care of her. He nodded toward Tira, who stood quietly near the door, her big eyes shining with tears. Karel's hands trembled slightly. Then she whispered, I will. Ethan turned and ran back to the console. He pulled open a panel and started rerouting the energy manually. Sparks burned his hands, but he didn't stop. The lights flickered as he shouted, Go! Get her to safety. Karel hesitated only for a second, then lifted Tira in her arms and ran out into the storm. The last thing she saw when she looked back was Ethan standing by the glowing console, surrounded by blue light, the tower rumbling around him. He was smiling, calm, certain. Moments later, a brilliant flash lit up the valley. The relay tower exploded, sending a wave of light into the sky that could be seen for miles. The snow reflected it, turning the mountains into shining glass. Karel and Tira fell to the ground, shielded by rocks. When the light faded, the tower was gone, but a bright streak rose high into the atmosphere, disappearing among the stars. The message had been sent. Days later, Karel stood beside the crater where the relay once stood. The air was quiet and the snow had stopped. She placed a small metal charm, one of Ethan's old tools, on the ground. Tira stood beside her, holding her hand. Mama, she said softly. Will we see him again? Karel looked at the sky, her voice calm. In the stars, maybe. His light travels with the message. It will never die. She turned toward the horizon. Above, strange ships appeared, Virith ships, not hunters. They moved slowly, peacefully. Her people had come, but not to fight. When they landed, the soldiers who stepped out carried no weapons. Their leader bowed to her. We received your signal, he said. The council has seen the truth. The humans are not what we believed they are. More. Karel felt a quiet relief. Yes, they are. The leader looked at the tool in her hand. Who was he? She smiled faintly. A human who opened his door one night and changed the stars. The leader nodded solemnly. Then his name will be remembered. Years later, across the galaxy, stories began to spread about the human who fought beside an alien warrior, the one who gave his life to reveal the truth. On Earth, scientists detected strange signals from deep space, messages written in both human and Virith language. They said one word over and over: hope. And far away, Karel's daughter, Tira, grew up learning both her mother's tongue and human speech. She often told others about the man who helped them. She would say, he was brave not because he was strong, but because he cared. Every time she looked at the stars, she imagined Ethan's light among them, shining quietly, reminding both humans and aliens what true courage looked like. Because sometimes, one small act of kindness, opening a door in the middle of the night, could change the fate of worlds forever.